The desert palace of Khirbat al Mafjar, also popularly known as Hisham's Palace, was built during the reign of the Umayyad Caliph Hisham ibn Abdul Malik during the years 724 to 743 CE. It is located close to the town of Jericho in the West Bank, and constructed mainly of sandstone and highlighted with baked brick. Khirbat al Mafjar is well known for the ornate mosaics and stucco carvings that are highly influenced by Byzantine and Sasanian art styles. The main parts of Mafjar are the two-storied palace, a private mosque for the owner, and another mosque which will be able to receive more people, as well as a bath that is accompanied by an audience hall. Looking at the general plan of this desert palace, it shows that there were 3 standing towers erected on the 4 corners of the palace. The one in the middle of the south side would have been the minaret, since it is on the side of the palace which would have had a small niche to be a mosque. Each tower, except for the gate tower on the east corner, was built starting from the ground floor. Having a tower built from the ground floor without any small openings for archers would not have held any defensive or military purpose, so the function of this palace as a militaristic one is decidedly void. Inside Khirbat al Mafjar, with the exception of the west side, which was placed in pairs, all the rooms that run along the remaining 4 walls of the palace are isolated from one another and fashioned themselves to serve as independent apartments. This planning would not have been used for the convenience of domestic life, but rather that of a palace used to house a great deal of guests for a short period of time. Although the palace was built during the reign of the Caliph Hisham, scholars debated whether or not Hisham was the owner of it. Many contributed its ownership to Hisham's pleasure-seeking and playboy nephew and successor, Walid ibn Yazid, who ruled in the years 743 to 744 CE. The relationship between the two was strained at best, with Hisham disapproving of Walid's hedonistic lifestyle and restraining his many building projects before Walid finally left the tense atmosphere and had his allowance cut off by Hisham. There were several points as to why there was some disagreements as to whether Mafjar was patroned by Hisham or Walid. Scholars who argue the possibilities of this being Hisham's palace point out the many imperial motifs found throughout, such as the stucco sculpture of the Caliph, who is guarded by 2 lions, as well as the most famous mosaic of Mafjar in the Diwan with a lion killing a gazelle. Lions have been popularly used in this region to symbolize supreme power, so these motifs strongly suggest a message of imperial authority and omnipotence. Yet, it has been found that although a palace might have many motifs symbolizing imperial power, it does not necessarily mean that the owner of said palace must be the Caliph. Such is the case of another desert palace of Qasr Amra, who has images of the ruler and 6 kings in the throne hall, but may belong to someone other than the Caliph, as was discovered by the inscriptions found above the imperial throne. Furthermore, even though Khirbat al Mafjar was incomplete when abandoned, it is a very ornate palace that Walid was known to enjoy as his winter palace with his entourage of women and treasures. Such an extravagant palace would not have been appreciated by Hisham, who was known to be a man of simple tastes and was disapproving of the luxuries and playboy lifestyle that Walid enjoyed. While there was some debate among scholars towards the beginning of Khirbat al Mafjar's discovery over who was its true owner, it has since been concluded that Walid was the patron of the palace, as well as the one who enjoyed its many luxuries. Furthermore, it can be determined that the main reason Khirbat al Mafjar was incomplete before finally being abandoned was because Walid had his allowance cut off by the Caliph Hisham over his pleasure-seeking ways and was unable to fund any more construction to the palace. The most famous part of Khirbat al Mafjar is the bath hall and the many mosaics that are within it. In the medieval Muslim society, baths held great importance as an area to socialize with one another, as well as an area to enjoy leisurely activities. While baths were used in social settings, they were also a luxury item, as it was not an easy task to transport a great amount of water to very dry areas. Furthermore, the bath hall in Mafjar is not in keeping with the stereotypical baths used in domestic centers, but rather that of one used primarily for hospitality purposes and to entertain a great number of guests. Scholar R. W. Hamilton accounts that with the royal emblems found across the facade, as well as the caliph statue in the very center of the facade, create an atmosphere that is distinctly royal. Furthermore, the artistic influence from Byzantium and Sasanian Iran are very prevalent in the bath hall. During this period, it was very common for the new rulers of the Umayyad dynasty to combine these two very popular styles, as they had just been conquered by both of these dynasties. Some of these distinctly Sasanian features include the fact that the caliph statue is in a Persian costume, as well as the winged horses found in the diwan. Additionally, the usage of motifs from conquered lands further emphasizes the power of the Umayyad dynasty. Not only did the Umayyad rulers defeat and conquer these once powerful empires, they also used their symbolism to intensify the idea of their semi-divinity, as seen particularly with the winged horses. The geometric designs that were popular with the Byzantine and Sasanian dynasties are so prevalent within this hall that there are a total of 39 uninterrupted rectangular and circular sections that cover the floor so completely that it can be taken as a type of carpet. It is interesting to also note that while the bath hall itself is very immense, the actual bath, or hammam, is very small and seems to only be added to the hall as an afterthought. The apse on the northwest corner of the bath hall opens up to the waiting hall to enter into the bath. It contained toilet facilities for a capacity of about 23 to 33 people. Room B was most likely to have been the cold water bath, with rooms C and D being filled with temperate and hot water, respectively. Yet the small baths in Mafjar could not have held more than 15 people, which would be strange since the waiting room would have had a much higher capacity than the baths themselves, making it likely that it was never used to its entirety. However, it is interesting to note that by the old standards, these rooms would only have been able to have been used by a small amount of people at one time. But by today's standards, these facilities would have been sufficient for at least 250 people. Nonetheless, for the Umayyads, these facilities would have had a great difference in capacity, and to make such a difference in size would have just been a waste of resources and money that could have gone to completing the rest of the palace. So what would have been the purpose of creating such an enormous bath hall, while having the bathing facilities themselves be incredibly small in comparison? To adequately resolve this issue, one must look at the decoration in the bath hall for clues. Out of the 39 panels on the floor, only one of them is a pictorial mosaic. In the center of apse 5 is a picture of a yellow fruit with its leaf to the left and a small knife on the right side. Some Arab visitors to Khirbat al Mafjar accounted that this is an allegorical representation of the caliph as the knife, with his wife and child as the fruit and leaf. This has been accepted by some scholars, but there have been no other evidence to support this, as no Sasanian or Byzantinian art represents the royalty as vegetation, nor would they show their mighty ruler as a small, unobtrusive knife. Furthermore, such a depiction of the ruling family would not have been placed on a floor which would have seen a lot of traffic and would have gone dirty. However, there can be another explanation for this mosaic. One must realize that Khirbat al Mafjar was not only a palace to enjoy oneself in, but rather that it was also an agricultural estate, with people working on its plantations. This vegetal mosaic could have depicted the presentation of fruit from the plantation as a gift to the owner, or to show the first produce of the season. Another motif present in this apse is the half rosette and half flower motif, which has a distinct connection to symbolizing Sasanian royalty. Out of all the apses in the bath hall, apse 5 has the most decoration and stands out clearly amongst the rest. While all the other apses are colored in white and have their floors decorated in simple patterns and borders, apse 5 is painted in green, red, and yellow, with a border of floral patterns, and has the only figural representation on its floor. Directly above the vegetal mosaic hangs a cone-shaped pendant that is attached to the ceiling by a chain. This image of a hanging pendant is remarkably similar to that of a hanging crown in the throne rooms of Sasanian kings, in particular Khosrow I, who seems to have been the one to introduce it. According to reports of Sasanian kings, the crown would have hanged suspended from a chain of gold, and would rest delicately on the ruler's head. Such an act of suspended crowns was also spoken about quite often by the famous Persian poet Ferdowsi, who spoke of the crown being suspended not only above the ruler's permanent throne hall, but also wherever he was residing during his travels. The hanging crown was meant to be a visible symbol of royalty, and was quite important during huge public events. While the cone-shaped pendant in apse 5 is not shaped like a crown, it could have been a representation of a headgear that Walid wore once he became caliph, which was said to have looked like a golden sugar loaf. Putting together all the different motifs found in apse 5, it is evident that the apse is completely decorated in representations of royalty, thus making it clear to say that apse 5 must be the throne apse. In the northwest corner of the bath hall is the diwan, or private reception room, which holds the famous lion and gazelle mosaic. The diwan itself is a semicircular structure and frames a mosaic with a leafy, fruitful tree motif. The scene itself shows a lion attacking a gazelle underneath a tree, with another pair of gazelles grazing peacefully on the other side of the tree. Such scenes of a lion hunting its prey are not uncommon during this period, as the conquering lion motif dates back to ancient Mesopotamia and Iran. While the prey can be interchangeable with any other animal, the lion is a staple figure of power and domination. Yet, in this scene, while the lion is attacking one of the gazelles, it is strange that the other gazelles do not seem frightened and instead continue to graze peacefully. Perhaps this was meant to imply that the lion, who has so often been considered a symbol of both power and royalty, is not actually dangerous enough to warrant the attention of the other gazelles. Yet there seems to be no reason to imply such a thing, as the lion would have been used quite often by the Umayyad dynasty rulers to represent their imperial authority. There is another aspect to the scene that is prevalent in Arab poetry. Arab poetry is often fascinated with the feminine beauty and love, and the gazelle is popularly used as a symbol of female beauty. In these poems, the beauty of the gazelle entrances men so intensely that they become seduced to the point where they must pursue it. To look at these poems symbolically, this pursuit of gazelles is a metaphor for a man seducing a slave girl, while the act of killing the gazelle is a metaphor for deflowering the slave girl. Thus, the depiction of the lion as a seemingly non-dangerous animal killing a gazelle while other gazelles peacefully graze could be a depiction of the lion as Walid seducing slave girls. This wouldn't be seen as too far-fetched, as Walid was a known playboy and even wrote poetry that featured the beauty of the gazelle. This trope was so prevalent that another caliph wrote about his capture and eventual release of a gazelle because of its resemblance to his lover, Layla. Richard Eddinghausen, another scholar who researched the lion mosaic, saw the symbolism of the lion in a distinctly different way. Instead of looking at the scene through the popular love poems the Umayyads wrote, he saw it in a more political way, in which the two sides of the tree showed the dual nature of good and bad. The Muslim world is represented as the two grazing gazelles, while the world outside of Islam is represented by the attacking lion. Such a political message would have served as a warning for everyone to say that if one was to leave the Umayyad dynasty and venture off away from the world of Islam, one would be entering a world full of evil and hardship. To stay within the sphere of Islam and the protection of the Umayyad Caliph and the imperial family would allow one to live a life without fear of something attacking unexpectedly. However, the main problem with this interpretation of the mosaic is that if Walid wanted to send out such an aggressive political message, it wouldn't have been placed in such a private chamber. To be able to achieve the full force of the message, Walid would have placed the mosaic in a more public place in the palace, such as the throne room. The diwan that houses this mosaic is in such a secluded place, and was a space probably used exclusively by Walid, that the only way to have been able to see it would have had to have been by the express approval of Walid. While the many mosaics and artworks found in Khirbat al Mafjar make the palace famous, it is the meanings and ideas behind them that make this place truly interesting. Each individual piece of art is important in understanding the overall meaning and theme that was envisioned for this place. From the mosaic of the lion and gazelle, the vegetal mosaic in the bath hall, or the numerous stucco and mosaic pieces, all of these artworks come together to make a unifying theme of royalty, and shows the luxury of the owner who would have lived in it. I hope you enjoyed this video on Khirbat al Mafjar, and that has inspired you to study the palace on your own, or made you interested in art history. Thank you for listening.